Hi there, and welcome to this video lesson on finding the area of a triangle. Now, finding the area of a triangle is actually a really simple process and it shouldn't take too long to pick up. If we have this triangle here, let's have a look at this triangle up the top here. If we want to find the area of a triangle, we need to know one formula, and that is the area of a triangle is equal to the base times by the height, all divided by 2. So the base times by the height, all divided by 2. And the reason for that is, if you think of this triangle as, let's get a pen up, as half a rectangle. If you imagine that I filled in the rest of those lines, you can see that this shape is a rectangle. The triangle is going to be half the area of that rectangle because it's half of that rectangle. So that's the reason why it's base times height divided by 2. One last thing that I want you to think about is the base and the height are always going to be perpendicular to each other. That means that they're always going to have 90 degrees between the base and the height. So whichever length you choose as your base, you need to make sure that your height is always going to be 90 degrees to it. Okay? So let's have a look at this first question on the left-hand side. Find the area of this triangle here. Well, first things first, I want to label my base. So I'm going to put base, or B. Which length is my base? Well, my base runs horizontally across like that. So my base length is 7 centimetres. And now the next thing I want to do is find out my height. And I've said that my height is always at a right angle to my base. So my height is going to be this length here, 4 centimetres. Okay? So with that in mind, we know our base and we know our height. The next thing we want to do is write out our equation. So area equals base times height divided by 2. Base times height divided by 2. That's the equation or formula for area of a triangle. Now what we want to do is we want to substitute or swap in or replace our base for our base number and our height for our height number. So we're just going to write a new equation, and that's going to be area equals 7 times by 4 divided by 2. 7 times by 4 divided by 2. Okay, all we've done is we've just replaced B and H with our numbers from up here. And now, just to the right of it, I want us to do this top sum, 7 times by 4. 7 times by 4. And if we do that, we get 28. And I want you to carry on dividing it by 2. So we've just done the top sum. And now from this bit, we can do 28 divided by 2. And we know 28 divided by 2 is 14. So our area is 14. And it's centimetres squared is the units. The units are very important. It's area, therefore it's always going to be squared. And it's centimetres because we're working up in centimetres here. And that's how you find the area of any triangle. So let's just go over that again. First things first, we find, let's pop a little bit green in here. First things first, we find the base. Second thing we do is we find the height, and the height is always 90 degrees to the base. The next thing we do is we write out our equation, area equals base times height divided by 2. And the next thing we do after that is we substitute, we replace our letters with our numbers down here. And then the next step is to do that top multiplication. And then the last step is to divide by 2 and make sure our units are all good. Okay? So area is always a unit squared, a metre squared, a centimetre squared, or a millimetre squared. Okay, so pause the video here. Copy out the working for this left-hand example, then have a go at this right-hand example and play the video once you're done. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go at this right-hand example. Let's go through it. So first things first, let's find our base. Well, our base is our horizontal length, so our base is that, 8 centimetres. And we're saying our height is always perpendicular 90 degrees, so our height is 5 centimetres. Now our next step is to write our equation, so area equals base times by height divided by 2. Now our next step is to substitute, to replace our letters with our numbers. So area equals 8 times by 5 divided by 2. 8 times by 5 divided by 2. And then we said our next step is to do that top multiplication. So 8 times 5 is 40, and we have it over 2 divided by 2. Now our last step was to do the 40 divided by 2. So 40 divided by 2 is 20. And what are our units? Centimetres squared. They're squared because it's area, and they're centimetres because we're working in centimetres. So that's your final answer. If you got that, fantastic. Well done. Give yourself some ticks. Okay, let's have a look at a slightly different example. So let's have a look at this second question on the left-hand side. Find the area of this triangle. Now this triangle is a little bit different because it's not a right-angled triangle. It's an isosceles triangle, but that's still okay. We're still going to approach this in exactly the same way. So first things first, let's find our base. Our base is this length here. So our base is going to be 10 centimetres. And now we said our height is perpendicular to our base, so our height is going to be 6 centimetres. That. Now our next step is to write out our equation, our formula. So area equals base times by height divided by 2. And now our next step is to substitute in our numbers for our letters. So area equals 10 times by 6 divided by 2. And now our next step is to do that top multiplication. So 10 times by 6 is 60, and then we keep it over 2. And now our last step is to do this division. So 60 divided by 2 is 30, and it's centimetres squared for the units squared because it's an area, centimetres because we're working in centimetres. So that's our final answer. Okay? So this one works exactly the same way. We find the base, we find the perpendicular height, we write out our formula, we substitute in our values for our formula, we do our top multiplication, and then we do our division and check that our units are all good. Okay, so pause the video here, copy out the working for this left-hand example, have a go at this right-hand example, and then play the video once you're done, and I'll go through the answer with you. Okay, fantastic. Hopefully you've had a go at this right-hand example. So, first things first, let's find the base. The base is 10 metres this time. Let's find the perpendicular height, the 90-degree height. So our height is 9 metres. Okay? Now our first step, or our next step rather, is to write out the formula. So area equals base times by height divided by 2. And remember, this is area of a triangle. Area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. Now our next step is to substitute in our values into this formula. So substituting them in, we have area equals 10 times by 9 divided by 2. Now our next step is to do this top multiplication. So 10 times by 9 is 90, and then we keep it over 2. And our final step is to do the division. So 90 divided by 2 gives you 45 metres squared for the unit squared because it's area, metres because we're working in metres. So that's your final answer. If you got that, fantastic. Give yourself some ticks. Well done. Okay, let's look at our third and final example. Find the area of this triangle here. Now, one thing I do want to point out to you is sometimes in an exam, you may also be given this length there. And they might say, I don't know, that's 7 centimetres. And so you've kind of got to work out what's the base, what's the height, and what's just something that we don't need. So first things first, let's work out the base. Always do the base first. And we say that the base is the horizontal length. So our base is this length here, so 4 centimetres. Now we're working out the height, and the height is perpendicular, always the perpendicular height, which means at right angle. So this length here, this 7 centimetres, isn't at a right angle to 4 centimetres. It's not at a right angle. But this 6 centimetres is. So we know that this 6 centimetres is actually our height. So we can say our height is 6 centimetres, and we can ignore that 7 centimetres for this question, that is, for this question. Okay? So now we have our base and our height. Let's write down our formula for area. So area equals base times by height divided by 2. Let's substitute in our values. So area equals 4 times by 6 divided by 2. Let's do our top multiplication. So 4 times by 6 is 24, and we keep it over 2. Now our last step is to do our division and make sure our units are good. So area equals 24 divided by 2, which is 12. So 12, and it's centimetres squared. Squared because it's area, centimetres because we're working in centimetres. And that's our final answer. Okay, so pause the video here. Copy out the working for this left-hand example and have a go at this right-hand example, this little added bit. I'm just going to add in that length there just to see how you can take it and how you can deal with it. So pause the video here, copy out the working for this left-hand example, then have a go at this right-hand example, and then play the video once you're done. Okay, so fantastic. Hopefully you've had a go at this right-hand example. Let's go through it. So first things first, what's our base? Our base is our horizontal length, so it's 6 centimetres. What's our height? Remember, our height is always perpendicular, 90 degrees. Is 9 at 90 degrees? No, it's not. Is 8 at 90 degrees? Yes, it is. Therefore, it must be 8 centimetres. So just to clear up this diagram, let's get rid of you. We don't like you. Okay. So we have our base, we have our height. Let's write out our formula. So area equals base times by height divided by 2. Let's substitute in our values. So area equals 6 times by 8 divided by 2. Let's do our top multiplication. So area equals 48 over 2. We've done our top multiplication. Now let's do our division. So 48 divided by 2 is 24. So area equals 24 centimetres squared. Centimetres because we're working in centimetres, and squared because we're working with area. So your final answer should be 24 centimetres squared. If you got that, fantastic. Give yourself some ticks. Well done. Okay, so what I've got down here is 3 checks for you to do and 1 extension. So pause the video here, have a go at those 3 checks, and they follow a very similar format to the first 3 questions we've done. And then if you're feeling up for it, have a go at that extension question. Okay? Pause the video here, have a go at those 3 checks, and then have a go at that extension question. I'll just kind of, there you go, that's getting everything. Okay. And then play the video once you're done. Okay, fantastic. Hopefully you've had a go at that first one. I think, just check, same, yeah, 5 and 8. Okay, so first things first, what's our base, our horizontal base? That's 8 centimetres. What's our perpendicular height? Our perpendicular height is 5 centimetres. Now, what's our formula for area of a triangle? Area equals base times by height divided by 2. Let's substitute in our values. So area equals 8 times by 5 divided by 2. Now our next step is to do that top multiplication. So 8 times by 5 is 40, and we keep it over 2. Now our next step is to do that division. So 40 divided by 2 is 20. So our area is 20 centimetres squared. Squared because it's area, centimetres because we're working in centimetres. So that's your final answer. If you got that, fantastic. Give yourself, where is my pen? Give yourself some ticks. Well done. Okay, let's have a look at this second question up here. So first things first, what's our base? Our base is 12 centimetres. What's our perpendicular height at 90 degrees? Well, that's 10 centimetres. What's our formula for area of a triangle? Area equals base times by height divided by 2. Now substitute in those values. So area equals 12 times by 10 divided by 2. What's our next step? Our next step is to do that top multiplication. So 12 times by 10 is 120, and we keep it over 2. Now, what's our next step? Our next step is to do this division. So 120 divided by 2 is 60. So our area is 60 centimetres squared. Squared because it's area, centimetres because we're working in centimetres. And that's our final answer. If you got that, fantastic. Give yourself some ticks. Well done. Okay, let's have a look at this third example. So a little bit tricky because we've been given 3 values. So first things first, what's our base, our horizontal base? Well, our base is 3 meters because that goes horizontally. Oh, let's get that along the bottom there. So that's our base. So what's our height? Well, our height has to be perpendicular, has to be at a right angle. Is 6 centimeters at a right angle to 3? No, it isn't. Is 4 centimeters? Yeah, that's a right angle. Perfect. So our height is 4 meters. Now let's write out our formula for area of a triangle. So area equals base times by height divided by 2. Now let's substitute in our numbers. So area equals 3 times by 4 divided by 2. Now let's do that top multiplication. So 3 times by 4 is 12 and we keep it over 2. Now let's do that division. So 12 divided by 2 is 6. So our area is 6 meters squared. Squared because it's area, meters because we're working in meters. And that's our final answer. So if you got that, fantastic. Give yourself some ticks. Well done. Okay, let's have a look at this extension because this is a really cracking question. And let's think about this. So what is the area of that shape? Well, it kind of looks a bit like a house, but how would we go about working that out? Well, if you think about it, or if you have a look, we can split that into 2 shapes. We can split that into a triangle and we can split that into a rectangle. So what we can do is we can work out the area of those 2 shapes independently and then add them back together. So let's work out the area of the rectangle. So if we just do a little diagram of this rectangle, so it's 6 centimetres, 10 centimetres. How do we work out the area of a rectangle? Well, that's base times by height. So let's substitute in our values. So the base is 6 centimetres and the height is 10 centimetres. So it's 6 times by 10. If we do that multiplication, it's 6 times by 10 is 60 centimetres squared. So our area for this is 60 centimetres squared. Now let's work out the area of our triangle. So what have we got? We have got a 2 centimetres there. What's the base length? Well, the base length is the same as that. So 6 centimetres along there. So if our base is 6 centimetres, 6 centimetres, and our perpendicular height is 2 centimetres, then we can just work this out like we've been working out all the other questions. So what's our formula for area? Area equals base times by height divided by 2. Let's substitute in our values. So area equals 6 times by 2 divided by 2. Let's do our top multiplication. 6 times by 2 is 12 and keep it over 2. Now let's do our division. So 12 divided by 2 is 6 and it's centimetres squared because we're working in area, so it's squared, and we're working in centimetres, so it's centimetres. So that is 6 cm squared. That's a bit squished, but you can see that. So now we have the area of the 2 individual shapes. We have the area of this shape, which is 60, and we have the area of this shape, which is 6. So to find the area of the total shape, we can just add them 2 together. So let's do 60 centimetres squared plus 6 centimetres squared. That gives us 66 centimetres squared as our final answer. So if you got that, that's fantastic. Well spotted. That's a really good way. If you manage to get that, that's very, very good. I'm very impressed. Okay, so hopefully now finding out the area of a triangle should be quite easy. All you have to do is find the base, find the perpendicular height, write out the formula, which is base times height divided by 2. You substitute in the numbers, you do the top multiplication, you do the division, and then you check the units. So it's a really simple process that hopefully we can all get on board with. What I suggest you do now is you have a look at that Corbett Maths worksheet that I've linked in the description, and you do all the questions on that sheet. So do question 1A and then check the answer, 1B, check the answer, 1C, check the answer, and just go through that. And that will really consolidate the information and the skills and processes that we've just learned in this lesson. And it's going to be a solid building block for your future development in maths. Okay,